Grab some of your dessert and take it back to your tables. There's coffee and water and tea on the tables. Is Tim Kelly in the room? There's Tim Kelly. We're going to get Panel C ready to go here, so all the members of Panel C, could you please get ready to come up? Also remember that we have the cards in the middle of the table. Please write your questions on those cards, and we'll have somebody pick them up from you. And then tonight is the banquet dinner. If you would like to go to the banquet dinner, make sure that you have it on your card, on your name tag. If it's not on your name tag, then you're not going to get in. So please make sure that you have that on your deal. And if you don't have it and would like to go, we have spots available. Go talk to the ladies at the registration desk. Okay? And again, bathrooms are over there or over there. So now I will bring up Mr. Tim Kelly, who is the President and CEO of the Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation. Tim Kelly is the President and Chief Executive Officer. He joined IVEDC in April of 2005. In his current position, he is responsible for the implementation of the region's Strategic Economic Development Plan. Tim's vision for the Imperial Valley comes from a comprehensive understanding of the southwestern region border and its effect on local, state, and international economies. His international experience comes from extensive travels and interactions with business and civic leaders in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And so now I will introduce Mr. Tim Kelly.
Thank you very much. I know there's some people outside wandering around, so I'm just going to take care of a couple things before we get going. I want to thank everybody for being here at this conference. I'd really like to thank the staff of IVEDC who did all the work putting this on, the ones that you've been talking to, especially Cynthia Mancha, Mike Paredes, our Vice President of Business Development, Sean Wilcock, Vice President of Business Services, Jennifer Jaime, Membership Services, and Terry Brown, our Administrative Assistant. Of course, the Board of Directors of IVEDC, our investors, and our volunteers. One of them sitting up here in the front, Connor Smith, who's handling all of our IT. The second year in a row he's done that, and he's on loan from us to us from the Imperial Valley Community Foundation. So we want to thank that. He's making sure everything's taken care of on the IT side. In addition to that, when you get a chance, everybody was given one of these passports when you arrived and checked in. If you could, make sure you fill those out. Go around to all the vendors and thank them for being here. That room is in the back. We want to make sure that we have people constantly going through there so they get a good response from that also. And with that being said, this next panel, I'd like to invite the panelists up to the table. I'll do a brief introduction. First of all, Rebecca Bordeaux, PhD, is the president of Oberon Fuels, a San Diego-based company making DME, dimethyl ether, as a cleaner alternative to diesel. I want to say also that this project is currently under construction here in Imperial County. And so I think you'll find this very exciting. And I've been involved with the project for about a year and a half. And it was when they broke ground, I think I've been going out there about every week to see the progress. In addition to that, we have Ron Kent, the Technology Development Manager, a major demonstration, Southern California Gas Company, a Sempra Energy company. Ron is the Technical Development Manager, and I've been working on several projects here in Imperial County with Ron, so we're very excited to have him here, although I see him probably on a monthly basis and on a weekly basis, speak with him about new projects. And Holly Smithson, the President and CEO of Cleantech San Diego. And Cleantech San Diego is a not-for-profit formed to stimulate the creation of expansion of a clean technology business cluster in the San Diego region, including Imperial County. So if you can come on up to the table, and we'll get going. I think, as you can see, this is probably one of the most beautiful panels you'll see, and Ron. But the title of this panel discussion is on emerging technologies, and I think Andy did a really good job of showing you why Imperial County is the renewable energy capital of the globe, and the projects that are under construction and those that have been completed. And it's pretty exciting that the large-scale solar and geothermal and wind projects that are being done here in the Imperial County. But that's just part of the story. And yes, we are providing a lot of energy that's going to surrounding areas, and of course the IID is working to meet their renewable energy portfolio standard, which if they haven't met it yet, they're very close. But in addition to that, on a daily basis, we receive inquiries from companies with new technologies. And one of the things that I promise them is that we'll work our hardest to get these projects developed here in the Imperial County. And they always want to know how fast it's going to take, and how hard is it. Believe me, it's hard. But what we try to do is make it less hard. And I will tell you, I'm very proud of the IID and the county for helping us and assisting in getting these projects moving forward. And so I always have to remind people, our job is to make it less hard. And I think we've accomplished that. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. And so that's why these people have come to the forefront. And you'll see from the projects that they've been working on and things that they've seen, you'll see examples of that. So we'll start off with Dr. Rebecca Bordeaux, who's going to be talking about her company, Oberon Fuels, and dimethyl ether. Thank you, Rebecca.
All right, well, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity, Tim, to speak about what we're doing at Oberon Fuels and what's being done in your backyard. So some of you may have heard about us, some of you haven't. So I'll walk you through what we're working on and put it in a context of the bigger picture, and then end with why that we chose Imperial Valley and the opportunities that this community gave us to launch our business. So the problem that we're trying to address is that diesel is a dirty fuel. All right, so the problem that we're trying to address, as others are, is that diesel is dirty and expensive. So we're all aware of this, and so from an emissions standpoint, we want to get off our dependency on diesel. Additionally, is the dependency on something that we're not producing all that we need here in the U.S., as well as the fact that it's expensive. And then the volatility in pricing makes it difficult for people to operate their businesses. So our solution to this problem is this molecule called dimethyl ether, or DME. So I promise not to give you a chemistry lesson, but what DME is, it's simply a carbon, oxygen, carbon. There's some hydrogens on there, but why this is important is because there's no carbon-carbon bond, when this combusts in an engine, it produces no soot, so no black smoke out of a truck. And so you have a clean burning fuel that can replace diesel. So different molecule, but it can combust in a diesel engine. So that's obviously advantageous from the emissions standpoint. There's other advantages. It's lower than the cost of diesel. You can make it from a variety of feedstocks. So anything that contains methane. So this could be pipeline natural gas, but this could be animal waste, food waste, landfill gas, any source of methane. And we can convert this to DME. Also, because there are a variety of feedstocks that can be used, there's less volatility in pricing. So obviously in heavy-duty transportation, this is advantageous when it's a very thin margin business. In the agricultural business, it is also obviously very advantageous. So DME is a fuel. So it combusts in a diesel engine, has a really high cetane number. So 55 to 60 is its cetane number, combusts very well. You don't need spark plugs. And it produces no particulate matter, so no soot, and enables you to control the NOx levels better. So this isn't a new molecule. It's actually been around for several decades. So it's being produced large scale in China. Japan, Korea, Egypt, Brazil are all producing DME. And they actually utilize it to blend with propane. So it's used as a cooking fuel. But over the past 20 years, OEMs have been looking at DME as a diesel replacement. So in the early 90s, actually, Amoco was the one that discovered that DME is an excellent diesel fuel. But with oil being $16 a barrel, there wasn't the customer demand or political will to introduce a new fuel. So automotive companies such as Hino, Toyota, Shanghai Automotive, Volvo, Isuzu have dabbled in looking at DME as a diesel replacement, but yet to commercialize it in a large way. So why now? So this is not a new molecule. What's changed? Why is it going to finally be commercialized? Well, there are a lot of factors. So increasing emission regulations, which you are very familiar with, more stringent standards, especially for heavy-duty transportation, agriculture, construction equipment, as well as new technology come along. And so what we've developed is a process by which we can actually make this on a small scale at a price lower than diesel. So this is a schematic of our process. So small-scale DME production. The production unit itself is only about 100 feet by 100 feet. So we can build these on skids. So we're actually constructing our production units right now in Chicago. Eventually we'll be moving it from there while we were permitting and prepping the site here in Imperial Valley in Brawley. So we go from, as I said before, methane is a multiple-step chemical process to make DME. So we can use natural gas, as I mentioned, or biogas, which is just methane and carbon dioxide. And so it's actually an advantageous aspect of our process is that we can actually utilize the CO2 in our process. So it actually makes our process work more efficiently. So obviously advantageous from the carbon footprint standpoint of things. So this process, we have 2 different size production units, and we can produce anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 gallons of DME per day. So focusing on heavy-duty transportation, which I've mentioned, will be initially the market we're targeting, but looking in a couple years at agricultural applications, irrigation pumps, tractors, combines, as well as construction equipment. So anything that uses diesel now can be used, DME can be used in the application. So a few advantages of our process are that from the financing perspective. So people always say large scale is better, so let's build it as big as possible, get the maximum efficiency. Well, the advantage in this case, when we're launching a new fuel, you have no national infrastructure, and today there's no market for DME in North America. So how in the world are you going to finance a large-scale production plant? So our ability to produce a small scale, our production unit costs $10 to $15 million, is that we can finance 1 unit, and as the market grows, we deploy more units. And so the idea is that we build regional markets. So Imperial Valley being the first region that we developed, we build this production unit, we produce the fuel. Fuel's about 60 to 75 trucks. And as the demand grows, we add more production units in that region. So we haul the fuel to people in the region, take advantage of feedstocks that are available in that region, and then utilize regional customers and create regional jobs as well. And the additional advantage of our process is the ability to use a variety of feedstocks. So in a large-scale production process, it's very difficult to use renewable feedstocks because you have to have such a large amount of them. Well, we're able to take advantage of feedstocks that aren't being utilized right now. So really focusing on wasted resources, whether it's food waste, animal waste, things of that nature that aren't currently being used. We also have a proprietary design of our process, as well as a small footprint. It enables us to put it on smaller pieces of land. And we can also build a unit nearby where it's being utilized. So where are we today? So as Tim mentioned, we have a project here in the region. We are building in Imperial Valley in Brawley, California. So I'll show you a picture of the site. Dirt is actually moving right now. And so this plant will produce 4,500 gallons of DME per day. It is the first site that we have built anywhere. And we just received our conditional use permitting. The grading has begun and actually finished by now. And then we'll be online producing fuel in May. So 2 months, we'll be producing the first phase of DME. So here's just a schematic of what the process will look like. This is phase 1. So this will actually, if you remember that the cartoon of what our production process looks like, this is the last step of the process. So going methanol to DME, that will be running in May. And so here's a picture of the site. So for those of you familiar with the area, we're at the corner of Kershaw and Rutherford Roads. So this is the old Kershaw feed mill. And so this is the site that if you drive by, you'll see what's going on. And so right now, so we are working on site prep, but then actually on the left are our skids that are being fabricated in Chicago. And so when the site is ready, the skids will actually be delivered on flatbed trucks. About 6 to 18-wheelers will show up with our process, and they'll be connected in many ways like Legos and connected to utilities on site. We're also in the process of building our own fabrication facility. So right now we have outsourced the construction of these skids, and we're in the process of, this is actually in Texas, 100,000 square feet of space that we're going to be constructing our own fabrication units, or production units there. So phase 2, again, the same site here in Brawley, will be coming online in 2014. So this will go from all the way from the beginning, biogas, so using a variety of feedstocks, animal and food waste, and going the full process to make DME. Because right now, the first phase is just that last piece, methanol to DME. So this will be the first complete production unit for our bio-DME. So just as I mentioned, we're using animal and food waste, but just to give you some perspective, we can use any organic material. So when organic matter decomposes, it produces methane and carbon dioxide. And so this graph here just shows you the relative energy content of animal and food waste. I'm sure it's nothing you've ever thought about, but it's great cocktail conversation to tell someone how much energy is in cow manure. But you can see that, so cow manure, for example, has about 3 times less waste or less energy than chicken manure. Who knew that, right? But bakery waste and fats and grease have by far the highest energy content. So things that have more fat in them produce a lot more methane. So as we are building this production unit and we started to have conversations here in Imperial Valley, we're really looking at this graph and saying, okay, what feedstocks are available here in the region and what's presently not being used? So we're not using crops. What we're looking for is damaged crops. We're looking for cow manure. We're looking for food waste, grass clippings, things of that nature that just don't have a use right now, and utilizing that in our process to make fuel. So just to give you some perspective, for our production unit here in Imperial Valley, that'll be 4,500 gallons per day. If you just looked at food waste, this could consume about 100 tons of food waste per day. So taking something that's problematic now, people are trying to divert from landfills, but utilize it to make fuel. So some of the market opportunities that I've touched upon is, initially we were focusing on heavy-duty trucking. So the largest trucks, 11, 13-liter engines, and that have limited alternatives today. So that's initially where we're focused, and focusing on regional hauls, so the people that go in and out of the same terminal every day and can refuel on site. Also agriculture, so this is obviously near and dear to many of your hearts, but this is something that we're looking at in a couple of years and starting to look at it now, but utilizing in applications today that require diesel that can utilize DME. Then also construction. So the challenge with construction is they're putting tougher regulations on equipment, but it's harder to use, say, LNG or CNG in these applications because of the infrastructure that's required. So DME is a gas. It handles like propane, a little bit of pressure, it's a liquid. So you have propane style equipment that you use. So people are very familiar with propane, inexpensive equipment, and so this has a lot of potential for construction as well. So getting to the heart of it, so this, we are based in San Diego. Our first site is here, as I mentioned, in the region, in Brawley. And really, we came to Imperial Valley because it was an interesting opportunity here. So there was a mix of transportation, obviously major trucking corridors through here, going to the ports, doing regional haul, but also because it's such a large agricultural region. So thinking from the perspective of farm equipment, but as well as feedstocks that are presently not being utilized, but can be utilized in our process. And so for those reasons, it was very interesting early on when we were looking at where do we put our first production site. And so we also were looking at the other clean tech projects that were going on here in the region. And I know Holly's going to speak more about the clustering of clean tech projects in San Diego and Imperial Valley, but this was interesting to us because while people are approaching the same problem from different angles, there's a lot of synergies in thinking about workforce development as well as things that are waste products from somebody else's process that we can use and vice versa. So there's some synergies there as well. And then looking to the Ivy EDC we worked very closely with early on. So whether it was driving around looking for property on a lovely August day in Imperial Valley, or just navigating an area that we weren't born and raised in, but we wanted to do business in, and helping us make those connections and develop those relationships. So I look forward to, I believe afterwards we'll have questions in the panel discussion, but thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I think it's a really good example of a project that is being constructed here in the Imperial County that IVDC had the opportunity to work on from the beginning. And I do remember those times driving around looking for sites, and this site in particular was ideal because of the zoning across the street from a potential feedstock, a feedlot, and next to natural gas pipeline. So everything was in the right place, and we hope there'll be other opportunities in the Imperial County for Oberon Fuels. So thank you very much. I think this goes right on to our next speaker, Ron Kent, who I've worked with quite a bit on these types of projects. And so we have many more to come, but I think Ron's going to do a good job of explaining to you his organization and how they're involved in these types of projects.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to address this audience. So I'm lucky enough to work for a company that lets me do really creative things and is a very visionary company looking way out into the distance. Our company's been around about 150 years. We started out making gas from coal and lighting the lights in San Francisco. So technology has always been something that's kept our company going, and we're continuing to pursue that. If I knew how to change the slide, it would be good. Which one? There we go. So one thing I'll say is that one of my first projects when I came to Southern California Gas Company was the Great Plains Coal Gasification Project up in Beulah, Montana. We were worried then in the 1980s about running out of gas because of all the regulations. It was kind of screwed up, and we were really running short. So we wanted to take coal and convert it to methane, and we actually built that project, and it was successful. And today, nearly 100% of the CO2 from that project is actually put in a pipeline and piped north to Saskatchewan, pumped into an oil field where it's doing enhanced oil recovery. And virtually millions of barrels of oil have been produced from that, and it's actually a zero-emission plant. So we're very proud of that. Then in the 1980s, we started the natural gas vehicle program, and I was involved in that, fortunately. And in those days, we would go around begging companies to use natural gas for their buses. And now, as natural gas prices have kind of decoupled from oil prices, they're all laughing all the way to the bank and how smart they were to do that. But in the 1990s, there was hardly any natural gas vehicles. Now, just about every bus in Los Angeles runs on natural gas. So some of the trends that we're looking for, from a natural gas perspective, are that natural gas is going to be cheap and abundant for a long time. They keep improving the ability to extract it, and they keep finding more of it. Some people always assume that natural gas is a fossil fuel, and a lot of it is, but for some of this natural gas, we don't actually know where it comes from. I'm reminded that one of the moons of, I think it's Saturn, Titan, has oceans of methane floating around, and that didn't come from dinosaurs. So it's kind of an interesting cocktail trivia. And then in the future, we're going to get more gas, more methane from biomass, from solar chemical process. So by solar chemical, I mean, what if you had a photovoltaic cell, and instead of making electricity, it made hydrogen? And maybe the hydrogen gets converted into methane and put in our pipe, or maybe the hydrogen just goes in our pipe. So that would be kind of an interesting way of using the sun, and it doesn't require a battery. And we have lots of storage. Our company stores 130 billion cubic feet of natural gas every year. We put it in the ground in the LA basin, and we pull it out when we need it. So we have what I think is the world's largest battery. And then we're going to see more natural gas, penetrating the transportation markets and displacing coal. I think you could argue that natural gas has done more to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions by displacing coal than probably all of the solar and wind projects combined. And then, in the future, as we go forward, there's going to be a lot of wind and solar, of course, but they are not always there. So having natural gas in a way that can fill in the gaps is going to be important. So I don't think we need any more base load natural gas plants, probably, not too many of them anyway, but we need plants that can load follow to fill in for the renewables. So natural gas actually makes a nice partner for wind and solar. And then what I see is capturing the CO2 from our product. We talk internally that, our biggest waste product is CO2. If there would be a way that we can take the CO2 and turn that into a profit center, that would really be elegant. So we're not emitting it, we're actually using it for something useful. So it's used for enhanced oil recovery when you put it in an oil field, as I mentioned in Canada. You can get another 20% of the oil out of the ground. So, of all the oil fields that we have in the US, maybe 30% of the oil has been extracted. There's another 70% there. By injecting CO2, you can get another 20%. That's, billions of barrels of oil that we get out. And the elegant thing about that is you put more carbon in. By injecting CO2, you put more carbon in the ground than you get out. So it kind of serves multiple masters. And I think that we're going to get better at using natural gas efficiently and cleanly. So I work in technology, and so some of the technology I've already alluded to, we're going to get better at getting it out of the ground. We're going to come up with unconventional sources of methane, such as methane hydrates, which is actually was just demonstrated this week in Japan, where they've successfully pulled the methane out of methane hydrates along their coast. And because they're paying LNG prices for methane, they're going to develop that technology. And then biogas, and as I mentioned, solar chemical sources of natural gas. So what we're trying to do is, even though natural gas is good, we're trying to green up the pipeline and make it as renewable as possible. And then, we're going to see a lot more LNG and CNG. We're going to see gas to liquids like Rebecca's company. We take natural gas and convert it to a liquid fuel because everything can't run on CNG or LNG, and we can use the existing infrastructure. And then fuel cell vehicles, I think, have a great future, and some of these fuel cell vehicles might run on methane. And to the extent they run on methane, you might be able to take your vehicle and plug it into your gas line and plug the electric output into your house and actually run your house, the electricity for your house, off of your fuel cell vehicle. Because a vehicle only runs maybe 200 to 300 hours a year. There's another 8,000 hours a year that you can actually use that to fuel cell for something useful. So it provides a lot of interesting approaches. And then carbon capture and sequestration, as I mentioned, getting the CO2 out of the ground, out of our product, making oil with it, making algae, that kind of thing. And then something we call polygeneration. What if you had a power plant that didn't produce power all the time? Maybe part of the time it produced power, but part of the time it produces hydrogen. And the hydrogen then is converted into fertilizer. Or what if we use some of the waste heat to do desalination? Or what if we use some of the power to pump water? So a power plant that has multiple uses is something that we see going forward. So I'm just going to run through a few of the demonstration projects that we're actually engaged in. This is in Escondido. This is a biogas cleanup plant. It's operating today. It has never not produced pipeline quality gas, so we know it can be done. And we're working right now to inject that gas into the pipeline. That is one of the challenges facing biofuels. The problem is it's expensive in connecting to the distribution grid. And what we need to do is perhaps socialize that cost so we can take more biogas into our system. And this is another example of a different technology in Sweden. They have hundreds of these things, and they use amine scrubbers. And the nice thing about this amine scrubber technology is it gets more than 99% of the methane out of the biogas. So it's very effective technology. And then I mentioned unconventional sources of methane, such as methane hydrates. This map shows you methane that's captured along our coasts. And you can see it's down there in the example is the ice there has methane in it. There's enough methane hydrates along our coast to operate the U.S. The amount of gas we're using today for another 3,000 years. So there's a lot of it. And I think the Japanese are going to lead the way in developing this resource, and it's going to be there for us when we need it. And this is the article from the New York Times yesterday about getting methane hydrates off the Japanese coast. And then I mentioned solar chemical. This is a mirror that we're erecting out at San Diego State Brawley. And one of the purposes of this is to do some experiments where we take concentrated solar and make hydrogen out of water, or concentrated solar using water and CO2 to make methane. This is the example of the reactor. I won't go into the details of that, but it's a very simple system. It uses an element called ceria, and ceria is something that everyone has in their homes. It's an element in your self-cleaning ovens. And the way a self-cleaning oven works is when it gets really hot, it absorbs oxygen, and when it cools down, it releases it. And that process is what helps clean your oven. And we're going to use that same principle to separate oxygen from hydrogen and water and produce hydrogen that then can be used for other things. And then another approach is capturing the CO2. This is a schematic for an oxycombustion system where we combust with oxygen. And when you combust with oxygen, the only thing that you get out of the combustion process is water and CO2. And as the CO2 and water stream condenses, you get pure CO2. And this is how we are going to develop or produce, say, 1 million tons of CO2 a year to provide for an oil company. And this technology is not just a schematic. This is an example of a turbine up in Bakersfield running off of steam and CO2 from an oxycombustor. And this is a diagram of the next size turbine being developed by Siemens that will do the same thing, except at the 200 megawatt range. The first turbine I mentioned is about 45 megawatts. This is about 200 megawatts. And here's an example of the same turbine, not as beautiful or anything like that, but this is it's actually, the machine can generate 500 megawatts in the entire cycle, and some of it goes to produce the oxygen, so the net power out is about 210 megawatts of power. That, again, is in Bakersfield actually running, so we've actually solved the problem of carbon capture in power plants, and we're actually demonstrating this in Bakersfield. Anyone that wants to come and see it, it's right off of I-99. And then a little bit different into the spectrum, can we use algae to recover CO2? And this is the project that's being installed here at San Diego State Brawley by a company called Combine Power. And what we like about their technology is it produces steam. It's a linear Fresnel lens that we can use to inexpensively produce steam. And then in the tubes, we can grow algae. So that might be a cycle that allows us to cost effectively make algae so that the energy balance is actually positive. So we encourage you to follow the development of this project out at San Diego State Brawley. And I think that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ron. I've actually been to that site up in Bakersfield and Kimberlina, and Sean Wilcock and Steve Birdsall were there when they ran this machine. It's pretty amazing, and I think in the future they'll be able to load these machines on a semi-truck and be able to use them as replacement energy. But one thing we didn't mention is that Ron is also the president of an organization called RCND, Southern Low Desert RCND, which IVDC oversees. And what we do is we find projects and then seek the financing for those projects. And we probably have a list of about 20, maybe about 16 projects that we think can be done here in Imperial County over the next couple of years. So it's pretty exciting, and they're all new technologies and bringing them to commercial scale. So our next speaker is Holly Smithson, who's with Cleantech San Diego, and I sit on the board of Cleantech San Diego. It's a great opportunity for me to be able to have the discussions with emerging technologies, with companies in San Diego that are looking for locations. And an example of that would be the ones that we just talked about, but I think Holly will have a lot more information and more information about Cleantech San Diego.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Holly Smithson, president of Cleantech San Diego, and delighted to accept the invitation by my board member to come out here and give you guys just a little insight into an organization called Cleantech San Diego. And if I could just survey the room real quickly, how many in this room have ever heard of Cleantech San Diego or are familiar with us? Excellent, good. So it's a semi-friendly audience. So briefly, what I want to accomplish in this brief presentation is, number one, for the other half of you who aren't familiar with us, I'd like to introduce the organization to you and why we were actually launched 5 years ago, and then drill down a little bit further into some of the leading subsectors that are really generating some great economic activity for the greater San Diego region. And before I get started, I'd also like to acknowledge one of my board members. One of my other board members in the room is Peter Fisher, with Light Source Renewables. He's kind of a quiet guy, so he might just be playing quiet in the corner. How uncharacteristic. So Cleantech San Diego, to give you a basic primer, we were the brainchild of former Mayor Jerry Sanders back in 2007, what we now call the Great Recession. And so a number of business leaders got together and said, what are we going to do to help diversify our economic development goals? And so the opportunity to attract businesses and technology companies to come into the region was really the purpose of creating this platform, this nonprofit member-based trade organization. Ultimately, we wanted to create this platform to bring together all these diverse stakeholders in pursuit of one common agenda, and that was to accelerate the greater San Diego region as a leader in the clean tech, this brand new clean tech industry. So there's no better way to tell you who we are than to show who's in the stable. We are very, very blessed, again, because of the diversity. The types of companies that are in our membership portfolio range from the big boys, like Soitec, like Lightsource Renewables, like Swinnerton, like Nielsen Construction, Honeywell, GE, and then we have the small startup guys like Solana Energy, like Synthetic Genomics Institute, and then of course we have a lot of the big strategic partners like Imperial Valley EDC, Connect, Sandified Unified District. Really the point here is that there is no corner of the economy that is going to be untouched by this brand new industry. And that's really, I think, the beauty and really the driving force behind why we've enjoyed so much economic activity around clean tech in the region. So if you remember nothing else from my presentation this afternoon, I hope you'll remember this slide. This is really our biggest asset. This illustrates this cluster. And by the way, for the record, I did not come up with the word cluster. But basically what that means, a high concentration of companies that are densely formed in the region. And so what I have here is a number of all the colored buttons and basically represent the biotech companies that are already in the region. They represent in the blue the clean tech companies, the research institutes, and the high tech. So that's why a lot of the founders really got together and said, we have every reason to believe that we can do the exact same thing for the clean tech industry as we have for the biotech industry and the clean tech industry, as long as we get organized and we show and demonstrate the leadership around this new sector. So one of the things you'll see here, we've got it kind of light at the bottom, but it kind of illustrates what's the profile of our cluster. Our largest subsector in the clean tech cluster in the region is solar, no surprise there, with over 230 solar companies. And then we have about 50 companies in the biofuels, energy efficiency, and transportation sectors. So those are what I kind of want to introduce you to in the next couple of slides. So as a nonprofit organization in the early days of being formed, we asked ourselves, what role can we play and how can we have the most meaningful impact in trying to stand up this brand new industry called clean tech? So we decided that we would basically look at our largest subsector. How can we facilitate the adoption of solar technology? How can we grow the pie? And so we had an opportunity in the American Reinvestment Act, and in that bill, there were about $800 million, a bucket of $800 million available for all the munis across the country that wanted to put solar on the rooftop and to finance it with a vehicle called Clean Renewable Energy Bonds. So we decided, let's go out to all of our munis, to our 18 munis, we have a great relationship with them, and said, hey, we want to help you execute on your renewable agenda, and would like to organize a regional coalition and bring together a bunch of MBA students from the university, some pro bono environmental and engineer folks, and prepare for what ultimately we won, which was $154 million out of that $800 million bucket. So it was an extraordinary, I'm going to really stress the collaboration that was behind this success. And I think what it signaled to the rest of the market is that San Diego region is very organized and very committed to attracting as much of these solar dollars and solar projects, and obviously support those 234 solar companies. In fact, UC San Diego just announced last week they just utilized another tranche of that $154 million in Krebs allocation. So for us, it really developed this apparatus so that whenever we see a big opportunity to help support the industry, we can go out to our munis, we can organize, we can mobilize, and execute in pretty short order. And so what started to happen, I think, in a very organic fashion was you started to send out market signals about the leadership that exists in the San Diego region. And so a company came into town wanted to enter the U.S. markets called Soitec, which I know is no stranger to you folks, and certainly is a great story about a region coming together, rolling out the red carpet, and trying to put our best foot forward for a company that was out of France looking to set up in the U.S. market, and obviously was looking at the Southwest. At the end of the day, we brought the utility at the table, we brought the mayor at the table, we brought all of the Economic Development Corporation partners at the table, and they ultimately selected us to open up their utility-scale solar manufacturing facility. So that was a wonderful story. In fact, just December, they opened up their doors in Rancho Bernardo, and obviously they're coming out here and using the wonderful resources out here in solar-rich Imperial Valley. So those are the types of things that we started to see was where we, as a nonprofit, could really stimulate the market demand and really tell the world that we're serious, we're committed, and we're open for renewable business. And obviously, the governor and a number of the energy agencies came down last December, and now the larger community will be embracing the over 1,500 direct and indirect jobs that this company will be ushering into the region. So that was the first demonstration for us as an organization to show leadership through collaboration. And I think what you'll find in my presentation is the constant theme about collaboration. And that is really, when I talk about the sweet spot about San Diego, that's really the leg up that we have that you cannot manufacture. You either have it or you don't. Much in the way, as I'm reading your annual report, about the tremendous leadership by the Board of Supervisors, the tremendous leadership and collaboration by the IID. It just really, really speaks volumes to that being the biggest strength of our region. So the biofuels. So about 2008, 2009, frozen markets, the capital markets were frozen. We started to see the biofuels cluster. There was about 30 or 40 biofuels companies in our region, and they had collectively but had taken in about $1 billion in private investment dollars. So we said, holy crap, how are we going to support these guys and make sure that when they do commercialize and when they do figure out this at scale, how can we, again, as a market facilitator, help these biofuels continue to grow? So we decided to, much like you folks, work on a parallel track and really come to appreciate that the workforce development was just as important as the deployment of technology. And so we went after, there was a huge opportunity, and we got organized, and we won a $4 million grant from California Department of Labor. Again, this was an enormous regional coalition and collaboration. And what we had to do was bring the synthetic genomics and the Sapphire Energies and the General Atomics and the Solana Energies and said, we need you guys to come in here and inform our curriculum. We need to know from you what you're going to need from the next generation of workforce in 3 years, in 4 years, in 5 years. So it was a powerful opportunity for the industry to really get in and figure out what it is they need. And then on top of that, we now have those classes in both the university and the community colleges. And because it was so successful, we've got veterans, we've got people that are transitioning, all sorts of folks that are coming into the biofuel space, and now we're going to use that model to replicate in universities and community colleges across the country. And it's just another demonstration of leadership through collaboration. I forgot the 300 people that were trained and the 100 that are already placed in jobs by those companies that were part of the industry task force. So the next subsector that we're seeing a lot of activity around is clean transportation. Again, this really reflects who the San Diegos are, because we like our early adopters. We like to be the first ones to get our new gadgets. And in this case, it is over 3,000 electric vehicles that are driving on the San Diego roads today. I'm sure there's a little bit of range anxiety, as they call it. But we are working very hard. Just last year, the California governor just negotiated a $100 million settlement with NRG. So they are going to be putting out over 200 charging stations throughout the state of California. And you would imagine that Cleantech San Diego will be working very hard to make sure that we have a disproportionate share of those EV charging stations. And that is another example of, again, signaling to the marketplace that we're organized, we're committed, and we've got technology adoption. So we just last summer got to invite Car2Go, which is a Daimler subsidiary, and they selected San Diego as the first city in the world to host their all-electric vehicle car sharing program. The cars are literally about this big. They are so tiny. In fact, Bill Walton, for those of you who may know, a tall man, sits on our board, and he said he was going to get one so that he could show that anybody can drive an electric vehicle. And then ultimately, UC San Diego, they also are in partnership with RWE, German company, and they are going to be hosting the world's largest campus EV infrastructure. So again, you can see the collaboration here between the private sector, the public sector, and our university partners. So energy efficiency, and I know much of what we're talking about here today is renewable energy, and energy efficiency just isn't that sexy. You know, we're going to change out some light bulbs, we're going to change some window tinting, but I'm telling you, it is the first pecking order for all of the state energy agencies. And so what we decided to do, again, let's go out and utilize our relationships with our munis, and they have so much political leadership to put their flag in the ground and say they're open for business. And so we were able to take advantage of some energy efficiency block grants. And what we were able to do, there was a provision in the law where you could actually piggyback. So if a city went out and issued an RFP and said, hey, we want some company to come in here and retrofit our street lights, they wouldn't have to do it recreate the RFP 18 single individual times. So they actually only had to do it once, and so that allowed for the rapid deployment of these energy efficiency retrofits. So this month we just finished the retrofits of 60,000 streetlights in 13 of our 18 municipalities. They're obviously excited to pass on those savings to taxpayers to the tune of $30 million over the life of those lights. And then locally, there were a couple of companies and some jobs that were created to the tune of $25 million because of that, again, collaboration, that leadership through collaboration. And then just to wrap up, this is the other subsector that is seeing a lot of activity in the greater San Diego region. It is the smart grid. And I would say, if I were to be pressed to say, what are your two biggest assets in San Diego region that are helping you propel this new industry and enjoy the economic activity? I would have to say, and I'm not going to put one over the other, but I have to put one first. I would say number one, it's San Diego Gas and Electric. They are the most progressive utility across the country. They have, just to put it in perspective, any other utility as it relates to smart grid can have anywhere between 4 or 5 smart grid initiatives. They have about 80 smart grid initiatives that they're grappling with currently, just to give you a sense of how progressive they are. They have been acknowledged and recognized by the White House, by the EPA, by the governors. They are just not your average bear. And so they have just successfully last year deployed 2.5 million smart meters, which basically gives us the foundation with which to link in some of the smart grid capabilities. The other big asset of our cluster is UC San Diego. And what a bunch of phenomenal visionaries. One of the gentlemen who's over there kind of running the show, I affectionately call him Lord Byron. He was tapped as one of the top 50 most brilliant people, and he went up to New York to accept his award, and he got up on stage, shared the stage and a photo with Lady Gaga. And if you just have to know Byron to appreciate that image with Lord Byron pushing his glasses up and Lady Gaga with all her banana peel dress on. At any rate, so they have, for the last 10 or 15 years, they have basically put together a power plant on the university. They today generate about 98% of all of their energy is self-generated. And you name it, they've got cogen, they've got fuel cell, they've got methane recovery being shipped in from Point Loma. I mean, everything under the sun, they've got it. And it's just an incredible demonstration of the vision and the foresight and their ability to invite big companies like Soitec, who actually first put their technology, I think it was 5 kilowatt, to demonstrate that it worked on UC San Diego. So that's the big story there that they like to put out. It's a huge lab to market philosophy that they tout regularly. So with all of that, we had an invitation 2 years ago. General Electric was scouring the world, and obviously they want to play, and they are playing very big in the smart grid space. They have the Eco Imagination campaign, they have smart appliances, they have EV charging stations. There's not really much they don't do or sell. So they said, you know what, we want to go in and actually create the smartest city in the world. Where can we go to do that successfully? Where can we find a really committed region? Where can we find vision? And where can we find innovation? And so San Diego was on that short list. Ultimately, we won out. We now link in again through this collaboration with the City of San Diego, UC San Diego, the utility, Cleantech San Diego, and GE. And this is a powerful, powerful example of public-private partnership that's coming together and collectively bringing the resources of each of those entities to help push this agenda and create the most sustainable and most resilient city in the world, and to show the world how we do it. Now, mind you, that is so easy to say. It is such an ambitious and really, really intimidating concept. But we have a lot of smart people around the table. We have a lot of big companies that are taking this on very seriously. And really, I think the pickle here is that we're going to do a lot. We're going to fail. And the key is to fail fast. And that's what pioneers, that's the burden of pioneers, to get all the bugs and the kinks out and then export at mass the successes and the learned lessons and the best practices. So with that, through Smart City San Diego, we've had a couple of byproducts. The most recent one is before Mayor Sanders left office, we did a huge unveiling of the first solar to EV at a zoo. We've got about 10 solar canopies, and they're charging the EV, 5 EV charging stations. And then we have a battery and inverter technology off the side. So want to capture the millions of people that come into the zoo every year and really take advantage of that captive audience and show our leadership in that regard. So in summary, I just want to kind of give you guys sort of our bragging rights and hope that we can start to collaborate in ways that reflect the strengths of this region, the innovation that you guys are bringing to the market, and the willingness to lead. And so with that, best in class, obviously we are the solar capital of the region because we are so blessed with so much solar installation, the early adoption that I mentioned earlier, and also because we have the most solar potential. As I mentioned earlier, we host the nation's first all-electric car sharing program. Just 2 weeks ago, we ranked in Forbes magazine top 5 cities with greenest cars. We mentioned the zoo, UC San Diego, the smartest utility by Intelligent IQ magazine for 3 years in a row. Also, one of the things I didn't touch on here is the military. We have a phenomenal partner in Admiral Smith and a lot of adoption and renewable energy at our bases. And Camp Pendleton has one of the greenest Armed Force bases worldwide. And then finally, as a state, we get more VC dollars, we did in 2011, than exceeded the total of all 49 states combined. That comes as no surprise. Where the innovation is, the money follows. So I just want to wrap up my presentation because we don't want to give all these sort of anecdotal one-off examples about great emerging technologies and the deployment and the innovation unless we talk about the dollars. And it's really exciting for us. We had an opportunity to partner with Sandag and commission a report last year with Bank of America so that we could start to inform the national debate and the state debate about whether or not this clean tech industry, is this a fad? Is this here to stay? Is it only going to be propped up by incentives? Well, numbers don't lie. We took the 5 or 6 subsectors and just took a really small sliver to benchmark the economic activity. And if you look at the total clean tech impact, you can see it's a pretty compelling argument that this is a very, very attractive economic engine. And so we will be benchmarking year over year so that we can track that growth and we can communicate that out to the world market and let everybody know that the greater San Diego region is here to play. So that wraps up my presentation, and I appreciate your attention and look forward to panel dialogue.
Thank you very much. Mike, do you have any questions? Does anybody have any questions they'd like to fill out forms? I just want to say I really want to thank this panel. I don't think you could have 3 better people come up and give examples of what's happening in the region. Imperial County has been a recipient, obviously, from some of the efforts of organizations such as Clean Tech San Diego. I think Oberon Fuels is an example of that. And of course, with the partnership with San Diego Gas and Electric and Ron Kent, we're bringing a lot of these projects to commercial stage. So just as Andy Horn gave his presentation today and talked about where we were a couple years ago and what's happening today and where the future is, I think we're looking at the new technologies. And the biofuels, I really feel confident, is going to be the next era, as well as some other opportunities. And so, my job in the Economic Development Corporation is to let organizations such as Clean Tech San Diego know what's available here in the Imperial County, what we can get done. I gave a presentation at Clean Tech San Diego very similar to the one Andy gave today, and Bill Walton at the end of the presentation looked at me and he said, "Is there any innovation going in the Imperial County?" Kind of caught me off guard. If you know Bill Walton, what is he, about 7'9"? I don't know. Yeah, without heels. I met him for the first time when he was playing basketball for the Clippers in San Diego when I was playing high school basketball. But it's kind of caught off guard, and I said, I don't know if there's innovation, but I know we can get it done in Imperial County. And I think through the efforts of San Diego State University with their new programs they have, we'll have a location to be able to take some of these projects to the next level. So I've got a couple questions here. First one is for Rebecca. What engine modifications are needed to use DME in place of diesel? And let me just tell you, I know Rebecca is prepared for this question.
Is this on? All right. So the question is about DME and diesel engines. And so as I mentioned earlier, DME can combust in a diesel engine. However, as I mentioned as well, it handles like propane. So it's a gas, a little bit of pressure, it's a liquid. So you have to change the fuel system on the engine. So same diesel engine, but it's a different fuel tank, fuel injector, fuel pump, and then they reprogram the software that controls that. So when it's filled into a tank, it's similar to fueling with propane, but then it's liquid injection throughout, so it's a pressurized tank. So you can use a diesel engine, no additional spark plugs or anything of that nature, combusts very well, but you do have to have a different fuel system.
Okay. And the second follow-up question, are there any domestic manufacturers working on an engine that will run on DME?
Yeah, so a lot of the DME engine development has been done elsewhere in the world, but there are the major international OEMs who are working in this space and looking towards whether they're going to commercialize or not.
Yeah. And I know that through the process, as we started looking at DME for the Imperial County, we met with the tractor companies here in the Imperial County. We found that the John Deere tractor is one of the engines that easily is converted to DME. So thanks. Holly, just got a question for you. Can you talk about some of the interests that companies in San Diego would have in Imperial County for future expansion? And Soitec would be a great example of that, and I think we're going to be a recipient of some of the activities by Soitec.
So one of the things I didn't touch on is one of the partnerships that Cleantech San Diego is involved in is with San Diego State University. They have a jobs accelerator and demonstration site here in Imperial. And I think it's a great demonstration and opportunity for new companies to come in and test their new technologies and utilize the great resources that this jobs accelerator, that's really the driving force behind that. The other thing, when I go out and I beat my chest about, how great the San Diego region is, we really do that from a position where we define the region very broadly. And that's, not one region is going to be better than the other. All of the regions have got to step up to provide the types of energy sources that we need. However, when we are trying to court the Soitec's of the world, when we are trying to court the Envenergy and Iberdrolas and Enel Energies and LS Powers to come in here and help develop these rich resources, to the extent that we get to partner and that we are aligned in the synergy that exists between all of the folks that make up the greater region, it just positions us so much better. And it's a real market differentiator. It's a real market advantage. And to recognize that is one thing, and then to market and really show the readiness that we have and the strengths that we have when we collaborate. And I think that's the beauty. The fact that we have you on our board, the fact that there are members on our board, and we won't call Bill Walton out, that don't even understand the wealth of activity that's happening out here, the leadership, the innovation, obviously says we got a lot more work to do. However, the fact that we always have Tim's always there, always coming in and educating and communicating and having that two-way conversation and having that ready exchange about the opportunities, I think that's really the key, and the fact that Soitec has come here, and there's a number of other of our member companies that are doing a lot of work out here. So we have to tell our story, right? Nobody's going to tell it for us.
That's right. Thanks. That brings up a subject. One of the vendors that's here today is Cali Baja Binational Mega Region, and Christina Loon is actually in the back, our director. And that's a partnership between IVDC, San Diego Regional EDC, and our partners in Baja California. One of the first things that we did was realize that we need to have an asset map. So the The map that Holly put on the board that shows the clean tech industry, we're actually doing that with about 5 industry clusters throughout Imperial County, San Diego, and Baja California. And I think that's a really good example, as Holly mentioned. It's very difficult sometimes. And, I remember I had a meeting in San Diego, and they asked if they're working with a company and they need about 100 acres of land for development. They said, we just can't find anything in San Diego. And they asked us, do you think you guys might have 100 acres in Imperial County? We looked at each other and said, yeah, we might be able to find something. So, it's through those types of partnerships and that dialogue and knowing each other that really does create the opportunities and having the partnerships that were mentioned here. Are there any other questions? Just final word. Ron will be here on a monthly basis meeting with our company, and we hope that we see some of these projects. As a matter of fact, one we've been working on is the sustainable dairy, and we hope that within the next few weeks we'll have a consolidation of our dairies in the cheese plant and start creating methane and energy generation and an algae facility all in one location. It's getting close. It's challenging. It's been a lot more difficult than we expected, but hopefully in the next few days we'll succeed on that, and you'll see some of these opportunities that Ron had mentioned come to fruition and be put here in the Imperial County. So if we could give our panel a round of applause, and I really do want to thank them for being here. Thank you very much.
Okay. In fact, we're a little bit early, so you can take a break. We've got a break until 3:30 when we'll start panel D. So use the facilities. Make sure you take your passports over to the exhibits. Get that taken care of so you can hand those in. And we'll see you back here at 3:30 for panel D. This is a sponsorship thank you. And so we're going to have that on the board for all the sponsors. In your agenda for today in the packet in the front are all the sponsors, so please look those through and go and meet with those folks and see their exhibits. Thank you.